Om. Guru Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vitvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapiyat Sarvam Trailokyam Satcharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Shri Chinmaya Sadgurave Namaha. Om Shri Chinmaya Sadgurave Namaha. Om Shri Chinmaya Sadgurave Namaha. Satchidananda-rupaya Vishnut-patyata-hetave Tapatraya-vinashaya Shri Krishnaya Vayam Namaha. Shri Krishnaya Vayam Namaha.
Keshava Madhava Keshava
Madhava
Chahe Radha Kaho Chahe Shama
चाहे काना कहो चाहे श्याम
Bada Mutha Lage Tera Nama Bada
बरम
Mitha
मीठा लगे
Lage Tera
नाना
Nama Keshava Madhava
शिवा
Keshava
माधवा
चाहे गाना कहो चाहे क्षमा
चाहे काना तो हो चाहे श्याम
बड़ा मीठा लगे तेरा नाम
बड़ा मीठा लगे तेरा नाम
तू है सब में तुझ में है सब
तू है सब में तुझ में है सब
भक्तों पे विपदा आई जब जब भक्तों
के नित्य हिताए जब जब
हर युग में तूने जग में आके
हर युग में तुझे
जग
जग में आके
बिगड़े बनाए काम केशवा केशवा
शबा माधवा
चाहे राधा कहो चाहे श्याम
चाहे खाना कहो चाहे श्याम
बड़ा मीठा लगे तेरा नाम
बड़ा मीठा लगे तेरा नाम।
अर्जुन का रथ तूने संभाला,
अर्जुन का रथ तूने समाया।
पार्थ सारथी बने गोपाला,
पार्थ सारथी बने गोपाला।
गीता ज्ञान के देने वाले,
गीता ज्ञान के देने वाले।
तुझको कोटि प्रणाम केशव।
केशवा माधवा, केशवा माधवा।
चाहे कान्हा कहो श्याम श्यामा,
चाहे कान्हा कहो चाहे श्याम।
बड़ा मीठा लगे तेरा नाम।
बड़ा मीठा लगे तेरा नाम। कृष्ण कन्हैया लाल की जय। So Vidur had approached Maitreya Rishi and had asked these questions and had understood the concept of dharma, artha, kama, moksha. And as he heard this last bit about moksha and the parichinnas, he bows down to Maitreya Rishi to leave to do his own tapas and his own meditation to pursue his own moksha. And so we come back now to King Parikshit talking to Shukdev Maharaj. And he's not yet had enough. And so he continues to ask questions. And he asks that you've already told us about Uttapada, who was Manu's son. Now tell us about the other son, who was Priyavrata, because I heard he too was a very great devotee. And the story of Priyavrata is quite elaborate in terms of he goes to Narad Muni to learn the scriptures and to meditate and is not interested in getting married. But once again, Manu goes to Brahmaji and says, you talk to him, he doesn't want to get married. And Guruji in his commentary of the Bhagwan said, these grahasthas don't like anyone becoming sannyasis. And so now Brahmaji comes to tell Priyavrata that, you can be spiritual even in grahastha house. And then the full explanation of how you can still pursue, do worship and still do this and Priyavrata is literally looking at Naraji like, save me. And Naraji looks at his father and thinks, I can't. And so he tells him, maybe you should get married. And so Priyavrata accepts. And he does. And then he has 10 sons and he lives very long. And as a king, he accomplishes so much. And then one day he wakes up, something like after 100 years, and thinks, but I got lost. I was so devoted. I hadn't even wanted to join this path and get married and come into Grahastha. And I've gotten so entangled with ruling the kingdom and, setting up systems and keeping order and earning wealth and the children. And then what have I done? How could I forget? And in that moment, without a second thought, he leaves. And so in this chapter, there's a lot of the main essence is even if we slightly, not slowly, deviate, we come back. Having turned to Bhagwan, that quest in our heart for the higher won't leave. It might get paused for a little while. We might get distracted. Yeah. But we'll definitely come back. And that's grace. And that's his kripa, that he'll won't let us go, right? That he will definitely bring us back. And so a lot of this chapter is talking about this grace. This chapter and the next chapter even more. And we are on, 5. And so Priyavrata goes, and then, like I said, he's a great king, and then one day he goes to the forest. And in the forest does immense tapas. But he is well known in terms of the Puranic literature, and also well known among anyone who was a king because of the way in which he ruled. And there's this description about how he merges day and night. I didn't quite completely understand. But how phenomenal must his mind have been to be able to merge day and night. And so the idea of this mind having that level of power to be able to change even the way time works. And then Parivarta is spoken about as a great devotee because he goes back. And with the intensity of the tapas that he does, he reaches very quickly. And then his whole lineage is given. And we don't need to go into the whole lineage. We only need to know that from him is born, in his lineage is born Rishabha Avatar. So from Priyavrata's son, and then somewhere along the line, King Nabi is born. And from King Nabi, who is very, very devout, he does this huge yajna. And when Bhagvan appears, because the yajna is done so well, and asks, what boon would you like? Then he asks, please come as my son. And Bhagwan accepts and comes as his son. Now in this avatar, so we saw Varaha avatar already, and that was karma, karma shakti. Then we saw Kapil avatar, and that was jnana shakti. And here, in this avatar, he's displaying the sannyas shakti, tyaga shakti. And so here too, King Nabi was a good king, and now he wants to go to the forest, so he hands over to his son, Rishabha. Even though Rishabha, being an avatar, had already said that he would want to live a life of renunciation. But he too, to adhere to Father, to fulfill Dharma, he has 100 sons. And like when they wanted him to progenate, he did a very good job. This you'll see when the finesse with which he does it. And here he would have meetings and teachings to his sons on a daily basis, and it was done in public. Like we had seen also with King Prithu, when he taught the public the duty of a king so that he can be responsible. Here, King Rishabha is teaching his children, but he is doing it in public so that they can be held accountable. And the teachings are quite elaborate. So if you read Bhagavatam proper, then quite a bit is these teachings. There's stories, of course, but a lot of them is these teachings that are being given by King Rishabha to his son. And the first thing he teaches his son in this bit, actually it says every parent should see what he's teaching his children, because these are the things parents should be teaching children. And maybe we should do a parenting course based on his lessons to his children. And guess what's the first thing he teaches his child? That the purpose of the body is not for enjoyment. I don't know if parents would actually articulate that to their kids. You have a physical body, but the purpose of this body is not enjoyment. The body enjoys, and every time we eat, it enjoys. And so much else. We'll enjoy music or massage or beauty. But the purpose of it is not to enjoy. And sometimes also we'll see some of our elderly people, and they'll have the phone and they'll be using it to watch only YouTube. But they won't even know how to work WhatsApp. And we'll say, but you should be able to learn this. And no, the YouTube's enough. But that's not the purpose of having the phone. When we have an equipment, of course it can get used for many things, but what's the purpose of that equipment? And so right at the very beginning, lesson number 1 that he teaches his kids, purpose of the body is to serve. We have been given this equipment to work. And interestingly, because by nature we'll want to relax. But purpose of body is to work. And this we've also already known. Now medical science makes it so well known. The more we are active, the healthier we are. And in fact, the more we are active, the better we feel. Even though in the morning when the alarm rings, we don't want to wake up. But when we do wake up and we do act, we'll feel better. Purpose of the body is to work and to serve. So that mind is purified. First lesson as a parent teaching kids. Purpose of the body is to serve so that mind gets purified. Purpose of the mind is to have devotion to Bhagwan. So the purer it is, the more we feel love. Actually, even if you want to take Bhagwan out of the equation, what's the purpose of our mind? To love. And the more we love, the more we're able to love, and the more people we love. And the bigger our hearts get, and then the more we'll be able to love, and then the more people we will love. And then it's invariable, we will see divinity and goodness everywhere. And then even though he says many, many, many other points, I'm just going to focus on one more. How to make sure we accomplish this, how to make sure we accomplish purpose of body, purpose of mind, purpose of life, purpose of whatever roles we are playing in the family, satsang. Now, satsang gets glorified in many, many places of the Bhagavatam. And I haven't mentioned it yet, and it's already Canto 5, so I better mention satsang. Satsang, in the company of Santa Mahatma, when we tune our thinking to their thinking, 1, we see things slightly different. Now, even we can read a book and see things slightly different. Even we can hear a talk on podcast and see things slightly different. But often what's being said in the scriptures go against maybe our everyday desires and go against maybe some of our strongest attachments. So in the presence of a Mahatma, not only do we see it differently, but we have the clarity that they have because of their presence. And so even if it's conflicting with my attachments, I can still see it clearly in that moment. I'll give you an example to do with the body because it's easier to always understand the body. Sometimes when we're exercising, if you have an instructor or a trainer, they'll push the body a little bit more than we ourselves can push because of weakness of muscle or maybe flexibility or whatever. And then they'll hold it there for a while and then they let it go. And the next time you do that pose by yourself, or that exercise by yourself, you'll automatically be able to move that muscle a little bit more. And technically, this is called muscle memory. The same thing happens with our mind. We're not able to think in a certain way. And then in satsang, because of the presence of the Mahatma and their tapas, our mind gets pulled a little bit more open, a little bit higher. And then muscle memory. Our thinking has now changed, opened, lifted. We may fall back again, but at least it's being opened. And then if our desire and yearning is strong, we will stay consistent in that new way of thinking, which is usually higher and more open. And so this benefit of satsang is so much more in physical presence. Now, of course, when it's physical present is not possible, satsang is beautiful, whichever way I can get it. And so, to stay in satsang as much as we can. But sometimes now we have little bit forgotten how impactful physically being present can be. So to be in the company of satsang physically, but more important than physically, because we can physically be with the person and not listen. So keeping their company in our thoughts. So the thoughts tune to the thoughts of what is being said in satsang. So he teaches, he rules for something like many, many years, and the kingdom flourishes and does very well under him. Who's this now? Raja Rishabha, who is also one of the avatars of Vishnu. But the purpose of this avatar was not to be a great king. He keeps that for Ram avatar. This avatar, he hands over the kingdom now to his son, Bharat, whose story we'll be doing next. And when he renounces everything. So he becomes a Nagabhagha, zero possessions, covered only with dust, carries nothing, doesn't even ask for food. And he puts a stone in his mouth as a constant reminder to not talk. Probably also not eat. But he did eat. He didn't eat much. If offered, he ate. But more often than not, people didn't understand the glory of his renunciation, and some even ridiculed or harassed, and no reply. He did not respond in any way. He wandered around with the stone in his mouth and never spoke again. And when we do the story in the Bal Vihar, this is the bit I focus on. And could we not speak? Some of us are thinking, yes. In fact, it would be so nice. I don't have to speak to anyone. Thinking equals speaking. Because we're speaking to ourselves. So often we are speaking to ourselves. Many of the things we speak to ourselves, we don't say to others. Just stays between me and myself. This stone in the mouth represents that level of silence where even I don't need to speak to myself. His mind had become so quiet. only functional thoughts. Even this, to notice how many of our thoughts are functional, how many of our thoughts are emotional, how many of our thoughts are daydreaming-ish. Introspection. If I'm not talking, then I'm only noticing this. I'm only noticing my own thoughts. In fact, we do Maun Vrat in the ashram. We don't have to put stone in our mouth, but we don't talk. And it's so interesting when we do Maun Vrat that we'll think, oh, I should say this. And we'll say, tomorrow, remember to tell them. Of course, tomorrow I would forget and I wouldn't tell them. But it's interesting that at that moment in time, we think it's so important that we tell ourselves to remember it. And the fact that we don't remember it means it wasn't important and it didn't have to get said. Then usually when I talk about this, when I talk about not talking, and people will say, then we won't have any friends. Like, you please don't make us do all these tapas. It's very good for Rishi in the forest wandering around, but we need to live with people. It's not that we shouldn't ever talk. It's about being able to not. When it's better not to. Like, so often things just slip out. It wasn't supposed to come out. But we thought it, and so it comes out. And so how to make sure it doesn't come out? Don't think it. That's the silence we're aspiring to. It's not saying don't talk and interact with each other. It's having that level of control. So this Rishabha avatar is that level of tyaga. The renunciation isn't just physical, that he's not wearing anything. The renunciation is of thoughts, of speech. Yeah. And so he wandered around for many years living this absolute state of perfect renunciation, reaching Paramahamsa level. What does Paramahamsa mean? Hamsa is this mystical bird that lives in the heavens. I don't think swans can actually do this on earth, but in heaven, you can mix milk with water and give it to them, and they can drink only the milk. The mystical bird in heaven exists or not, I don't know. But this I know. What it means is when I look at this world, usually in Maya, everything's mixed. And I can't tell what's real and what's unreal. Paramahamsa looks at this world and can see very clearly what is real and what is unreal. And so reaching this state of tyaga, once when there was a fire, he allows the fire to burn him so that nobody even has to do his cremation. Again, you see this as a recurrent theme. The greatest tyagis don't want to impose even that. Even this you shouldn't have to do. My last rites and look after the body. Although interpretation, Bhagavatam says he burns in a fire in the forest. Although interpretation from Santa Mahatma, like we saw, what's her name? Sati. Sati was able to invoke yogic fire to burn her body. Here too, he had reached the state, I forgot one very important thing. At this stage, when he was in the forest roaming around as a tyagi, all the siddhis, all the devatas, came and stood in front of him, asking him to accept them. So siddhis are all the mental powers we have to be able to read minds, to be able to teletransport. And the list is given of how many things, how many powers were waiting to serve him. But every time a siddhi came and bowed down and asked him to accept, he turned his head. And so Parikshit Ji Maharaj asked Shukdev that he's such a great renunciation, why didn't he just take the siddhis? And here Shukdev Maharaj says, never trust your mind. You don't know when it will get attached to something. And so if Tyaga is the path you've chosen, don't even tempt it. And here Guruji usually tells the story of there was a great Mahatma and the students kept asking him, have you conquered your mind? And he would answer, I'll tell you later. So next, after a couple of months again, some very curious bodies, they always like asking these questions. Have you conquered your mind? I'll tell you later. Then again, after a couple of months, then one day he was very sick and he already knew, great Mahatmas usually know when they're going to die. We hear 300 stories of our own Purusha Gurudev, and he knew exactly to the date that he was going to go. So Mahatmas know. And when it was like 1 hour before he was going to go, this Mahatma in the story calls the disciple that kept asking him and answered, yes, I've controlled my mind. And then he said, why do you wait so long to answer? I've been asking you for like the last 2 years. And he said, because you never know till it's over. This mind, by nature, is prone to get attached. When we understand that, when we understand it's the nature of the mind to get attached, then there's no need to get angry with it. Right? Like if you have a pet at home and it's their nature to get excitable, that's their nature. And if it's their nature to be sulking, then that's their nature. And then when you got kids at home and it's their nature to be whatever, then that's their nature. Mind's nature is to get attached. No need to get upset with the mind. But don't tempt it. And so when the Siddhis came to Rishabha, he said, no. He didn't even accept Siddhis. All he wanted was to be lost in the presence of divinity. So like I said, he burns in yogic fire of jnanam. Now we do know great rishis that have. They have been able to make their bodies disappear using nothing but thought. And if Siddhis were waiting to serve him, then that's possibly what he had done as well. So his avatar ends with the epitome of Tyaga being shown in that form. And then his son Bharat. This story is very well known. How many of you already know the story of Bharat? Only one or two? King Bharat? No, I think when I start telling the story, y'all will all start nodding. Okay, so this is his son. Again, first we have to say this. He was a great king. He did lots of yagnas. He ruled very well. He served the community. And then he went to the forest to meditate. This whole chapter is about kings and then their ability to go back to devotion as their sole pursuit. Doesn't matter how much power they have, doesn't matter how much wealth they have, doesn't matter how much enjoyment they have access to, all of it's left because now that's done. And the reason there's so many stories of so many kings who reach such great heights of success and then leave the success and go to the forest to meditate is to reiterate to us that they should be at some point where we also say, okay, enough. Now we'll turn attention to Bhagwan. with as much single pointedness as I had turned attention to achieving in the world, I turned my attention to achieving for my soul. So Bharat's story is a little bit more fun, more entertainment. Rishabha's story is just stone in the mouth, no entertainment. Bharat's story is lots of entertainment. So after ruling and going to the forest, he's doing tapas. He's doing very well. And then one day he hears this roar of this lion, which brings him out of his meditation. And just in time, he sees the lion attack a pregnant deer. And as the deer is getting eaten by the lion, she releases the baby fall. She releases the fall so that its life is saved. Yeah? And so now, of course, this fall has no mother because the lion has. And so Bharat Rishi is looking and sees this and is overwhelmed with so much compassion for this little fawn. So he takes it and he cleans it up, and then he tries to find food. And very innovative how you put milk in the cloth and then you put it and you give it, and all of that he was able to figure out. And then, babies, oh, it's very easy. It's very easy when you have a baby to become extremely attached because they're so cute. And it doesn't matter what kind baby it is. Any animal's baby looks very, very cute. And so, of course, this fawn is very cute. And so every day now he's thinking, have to feed it breakfast, have to feed it lunch, have to feed it dinner. And is it growing properly? And is it safe? And is it looking out? And so even when he's supposed to be sitting and meditating, he's thinking, where's that deer? I hope it's okay. And at one point, he even tied a string to the deer so that it doesn't go too far away. And one day when he was out and about doing things, there was no string tied. The deer's not attached to him. So the deer happily goes. And now he can't find it. And it's not coming back. And so now so upset that it left me it didn't even say bye. And does it remember me? And so thinking about this deer, he dies. And because he's thinking about the deer when he dies, the last thought we think is what we become. And so he's born again as a deer. But this is a beautiful thing about karma. The attachment karma got a result of being born again as a deer. But the devotion karma before that deer came along, that should also have some results, right? It did. When he's born as a deer, he remembers. He remembers he was a king. He remembers he left the whole kingdom to go meditate in the forest only to get attached to a deer. He traded away the whole kingdom for one deer that just left him. And so he thinks, well, this life now I can't do anything. We just have to wait for it to pass. But he does go near ashrams and he sits and he listens to satsangs, even in the form of a deer. And then deers, I don't think, live that long. So he didn't have to wait that long, not as long as human lives, anyways. And now he's born again. And nobody knows what his name was because everyone just called him Jada, which would be equivalent to dummy, but he wasn't. The punya of all that devotion and all those yagnas that he did as a king and the tapas he did before the deer, he remembers even in this life that he was King Bharat, that he got born as the deer because he got attached to the deer. And so this life now, he's so determined not to get attached to anyone. And the example given is if somebody burns their tongue while eating something hot, then afterwards they even blow on lassi to make sure they don't get burned. Like that, the extreme, I'm not going to get attached. So he doesn't talk to anyone and he pretends like he's unintelligent. So his father tries to teach him Gayatri Mantra and he pronounces every word wrong. Even after 5 years, he keeps pronouncing every word wrong. And so then now they assume that really nothing can be taught to him. Any instruction they give him, he does exactly the opposite. So the people in the house were very infuriated with him. And then finally, when the parents die, they kick him out, and then he's very happy. And one day he's walking along, and the king had to go somewhere, and they were carrying him in a palanquin. And the fourth person who was supposed to be carrying the palanquin didn't come, just no show. So they looked around and they saw him, and he's very healthy. Interesting, this is pointed out very clearly. He didn't eat much. Because after he left home, he didn't have much food. But he was phenomenally strong. And there's even a line written, you don't need food to be strong. Oh, wait, I missed one bit. Sorry. Rewind. Some Kali worshippers were going to offer an animal in sacrifice, but the animal was managed to run away. And so the sacrifice was ready, and they didn't have the puja, the ritual was ready, but they didn't have anything to sacrifice. And they saw Jada Bharat sitting here, so they grabbed him. And they took him, they bathed him, they dressed him, they adorned him with sandalwood paste, and they put him there to sacrifice. And the minute they put him down to sacrifice, Ma Kali came out of her statue, took the knife from the person who was going to do the sacrifice and cuts his head. And then cuts all the deckard's head. And when I read that, I thought, yeah, when you're worshipping Mother Kali, you should really know what you're doing. But here, it's very clearly said. He pretended to be unintelligent, but he was constantly meditating on Bhagwan. Every moment of every day, he was meditating on Bhagwan. The tapas that he started as King Bharat, and he wasn't going to let that go to waste. And so his mind was always reveling in the highest truth. And from the experience as a deer, he had already understood everything. That this life itself, he was free. And so Ma Kali won't allow a devotee to get hurt. And they were thieves that were making this sacrifice so that they could get wealthier, and so their karmas came back to them. But he was saved. And now his reaction upon Mother Kali manifesting to save him. And I told you his story is a little entertaining. He said, oh, I was wanting to die. Like, this in life, I'm just living because I have to live. The minute I die, I'll merge with Bhagwan. But okay, you saved me. Something must be more for me to do. And so he wanders along. And that's when he gets grabbed by these palanquin carriers. And now, there's a pattern of walking when you're carrying a palanquin. And he was least interested. Also, he has a reputation to keep of being ineffective. But what was really cute is he would see if any bugs were walking on the floor, and he'd walk right. He'd jump so that he wouldn't step on them. So every time he sidestepped or jumped, this king in the palanquin was hitting his head. So he gets so annoyed and he says, basically says, are you that unintelligent that you can't even carry a pelican? And then furthermore, because he's looking at him, you look hale and hearty enough, are you just that lazy? And he answers, how do you know who's the king and who's the servant? And the body that's carrying the pelican feels no weight and was meant to carry the pelican, then it would. And then he says one more thing about you assuming I do not know, but it is you who don't. I've marked the verses. And this king who was in the chariot was on his way to meet a guru. And so when he hears this, he thinks, I'm not scared of anything except insulting a Mahatma. So he gets out of the pelican and he comes and he bows down and he says, who are you? This is also the first time Jada Bharata has spoken in this life a sensical statement. Why? Because this king in his last life was a deer. And that deer was meant to live 100 more lives before it became a human. But because it got satsang, and usually the story is told about attachment, but this bit is so powerful. From having to live 100 more lives as an animal, because it got satsang, he was born again as human. And not just human, human wanting satsang. The pelican was taking him to Kapil Muni's ashram, who we've already heard about, who was a great teacher. And he had so many questions that he wanted to ask. And so Jada Bharata now tells him the story of how he was a king. He got attached and now he's born again. And here the king asks so many questions and Jada Bharata replies all of them and enlightens this king. The king then leaves there to go to meditate. And now Jada Bharata's task seems to be complete. Like Mother Kali had to save him because this task he still had to perform. And now that his task is complete, meditating on the Lord, he also leaves this body. And when we talk about these teachings that he gave to King Raghuguna, it's vast, right? Every time there's a teaching in the Bhagavatam, it's extensive and it's so beautiful and it's so deep. And I've been taking out different points and focusing just on one thing. Here he talks about, how do you know that you the king and I'm the servant? Right? It could have been at one point that I was the king and you the servant. And then he narrates this whole story and it's that, right? He was a king and he did know what it was like to be a king. And so he talks about, but right now I'm the king and you carrying the palanquin. It doesn't matter what happened then. This is real. And Bharat answers, no. If something is real now, but wasn't real before and won't be real after, then it's relative. Usually, we'll say mithya. And we translate mithya as false or unreal. That's not what it means. Mithya means only true for limited time, which is in English relative. So if I say it is night, is that the truth? We'll also, yeah, it's the truth. But it won't be true tomorrow. So it's relative. So much of what we think is real is actually relative. Like the example I gave, it is night. Real. I am young. Completely relative. We have a youth camp, and the youth camp age group is from 20 to 30. Well, 18. After they finish high school, they can come to youth camp. So this youth camp, we had some 18 and 19-year-olds, newbies at the youth camp, and they went around deliberately asking everyone, how old are you? And anyone who said they were 26, 27, 28, 30, they'd start calling them uncle. These cheeky little brats. Imagine being at a youth camp being called uncle. They found such thrill in it, huh? They found such thrill in calling a 26-year-old uncle because they are 18. And I said, you just have to wait 6 years. They'll already start feeling very old. The poor 30-year-olds at one point was like, I'm not coming back to camp. I am young, but it's relative. I am healthy. I am sick also. It's relative. Okay? Whichever emotion I'm feeling, we think it's true. I am angry. Are you? It's not true. It's just relative. It's going to change. Relative. Not real. And the teaching is to what's real. To hold on to what's real, we have to know what's real. If we hold on to relative thinking it's real, when it leaves, when it changes, our faith shakes. Yeah. And so this understanding of real and relative is the one point we are taking from Jada Bharata. Because he understood very clearly. And this whole don't trust your mind. This whole canto is about you may get slightly off track, but you'll come back on track. And why do we go off track? Don't trust your mind. Then who to trust if I can't trust my own mind? Only one person we can trust. Only one. Only that which is real. That which never changes. And so, Canto 5 is fairly short. And we can make a start on the next canto, which is canto number 6 is maybe where Bhagavatam really starts getting the flavor of Bhagavatam, because it's all about the glory of Bhagwan's name. Here too, the story is fairly well known, especially to those people who have been listening to satsangs. It's about a devotee called Ajamila. Again, how many of you already know Ajamila's story? No? Few. Again, when I start telling it, you'll say, yeah, yeah, yeah. His name is interesting. So often in the Bhagavatam, the names are very significant. Yeah? Aja means one who is unborn. Usually we refer to Aja as Bhagwan. Even Puja Gurudev's names, Om Ajaya Namaha, is the first name. So realized masters. And someone who is not born, because only those, whoever is born has to die, and so to be deathless, you have to be birthless. And so Bhagwan is described as birthless rather than deathless. Milaha is Maya. And so Ajamila is this meeting of Maya and Bhagwan, which is all of us. His story is not all of us, but this, we are all that divine essence, then trapped by Maya, forgetting we are that divine essence, and then living and being and experiencing Maya. His story also we'll do fairly fast. Walking through the forest one day, he sees a prostitute with her customer. And when desire enters through two ways, through the eyes and through the ears. It can also enter through the nose and the tongue and touch, but these are the easiest ways for desire to enter. He couldn't get the image out of his mind. And so he kept thinking about it, kept thinking about it, kept thinking about it, until finally he goes to her. And then once he goes to her, he becomes enamored. So he sends his wife off. Before this, he was a very pious person. He used to do lots of pujas. He worked as a brahmana. But now he has sent his wife off, he neglects his children, and he has moved in with her. And they're living in complete indulgence. They have a kid, and the kid is also about 5 years old, and they still haven't named him. And one day when a saint is walking past, some very cheeky person in the city, he said, the saint asked, which is a charitable home? Probably to ask for alms, he asked, which is a charitable home that I can go to, which will give me alms. But this person is so cheeky, he says, go to Ajamala's house. Ajamala's not there, she's there. The minute the saint approaches this house, he's understood. And vibrations and insight, and can see the way they're living. He sees the child, and then out of compassion, he asks, what's the child's name? And she answers so truthfully that no Pandit will come and do the name ceremony for him, so he doesn't have a name. But since you have come, please name him. Now, this Pandit coming is such a great blessing, because the Pandit says, name him Narayana. So Ajamala comes home, she tells him, our son finally has a name. And they start calling him Narayana. Years go by, he's about 80 years old now, and he feels heavy in the chest. He's having a heart attack. And in that pain, he yells out for his son. So he screams 2 times, 3 times, Narayana, Narayana. But the heart attack was supposed to have taken effect. It doesn't. What happens is when the Yamadutas come to take him, the Vaikundutas also come. Vaikundutas are the gods from Vaikunt, right? And you know who they are because everybody in Vaikunt looks like Lord Vishnu. When you go to Vaikunt, you automatically now look like Bhagwan Vishnu. In some organizations, they'll say you look like Krishna. Yeah, same thing. So the Vaikunth Dutas asked the Yamadutas, do you not understand Dharma? You are the servants of Dharma Raj. Yama, Lord of Death, is also called Dharma Raj. And they said, of course we understand Dharma. And every action has a consequence, and he's done so many actions that have very unpleasant consequences. And so we're here to take him to face all those consequences. And he was born a Brahmana, and then he's completely neglected all his duties. He abandoned his family. He has a lot to answer for. And the Vaikunduta said, but your understanding of Dharma is not complete. Because any person who says the Lord's name at the point of death now belongs to Bhagwan. And you no longer have jurisdiction on him. And they said, this can't be true. And so they reply, there is a power greater than your master. Go and ask him. So now, because they don't know if this is true or not, they have to go and ask him. In the meantime, the Vaikundutas also leave. And Jamila wasn't taken. But he remembers very clearly the conversation. He also knows he didn't call Bhagwan. He called Bhagwan's name, but he was calling his son. And later on, the Devatas go and ask Yamraj how, no, they don't go ask Yamraj. They go ask Bhagwan, but he wasn't calling your name. He had no intention of calling your name. And Bhagwan's answer is so sweet. And I know he was calling his son. But how old's his son? 10 years only he had that name. I've had that name for thousands of years. It was my name first. You think I don't know he was calling his son? But it's my name. He may not know my name, but I know my name. And if this is the power of my name, this is the power of my name. The Devatas couldn't argue with him. Right? Now, coming back to Ajamala. Now the heart attack's gone because the Yamaduts couldn't take him. And he's very much alive. And he remembers the exact conversation of how he's going to have to face all the karmas of what he's done. Pause here. Why does this story come? The 6th canto starts with, actually the 5th canto, I didn't go into it. In the 5th canto, after Jada teaches, he gives this description of all the different hells. Because the king asked, so he answered. And there's, initially we say 7 hells, but there's so many different hells. And there's so many different types of suffering. And so now, Parikshit Maharaj, having heard all these different hells, feels a bit sad When you hear of suffering, you'll get a bit sad. And so he asked Shukdev Maharaj, is there a way to purify ourselves of sin? Like if we do sin, then we should be able to purify ourselves of sin. And so Shukdev Maharaj answers immediately that if we do, then there should be remorse for having done. Yeah. He gives an example. I've forgotten the example he's giving. And then there is genuine wanting to change. Then we can be purified of that sin. Yeah. Sometimes we'll do things and we'll think they deserve it. When we don't realize, but please remember, we use the sin different. We use the word sin to mean something taking us away from Bhagwan. Yeah? We don't think in terms of right and wrong as much in Hinduism as feeling Bhagwan's presence versus not feeling Bhagwan's presence. And so let's say somebody does something and then we think they deserve it. So firstly, we lost maybe to anger, or maybe to jealousy, maybe to greed, and then we did it. And that already took us further away from our divinity. Then we get stuck in the feeling that they deserved it. We get further away in our divinity. Like compassion is even when we have done things and we're deserving of punishment, Bhagwan forgives us or gives us less. Right? And so nature is compassion. And then when we're not feeling compassion, then that means we're away from our nature. So to feel remorse that hurt was done, and then to want to change. And I guess the best example, even though that's not the example that Shukdev Maharaj used, is Parikshit Ji himself. When Parikshit Ji put that snake around, there was remorse. And remember his prayer? So genuine wanting to change. Then we are able to clean ourselves from sin. And then the last step is to chant Bhagwan's name. And then we think, can it be that simple? And that's Maya. Because we think we can't be cleansed from our sins, we're not. Even when we dip in Mother Ganga, it is said she purifies us of all sin. And she actually does. But we come out after the dip thinking, am I really pure? And our doubt only is the sin. It is said, saints like Kabir Das, Tukaram Maharaj, and Rai Das, they had to say Bhagwan's name once, just once. And it purified them. And we say Bhagwan's name, and it purifies us. But the next moment, we go back to being extroverted and judgmental and so it's likened to an elephant's bath. If you see an elephant bath, it goes into the water and it cleans itself, and then it comes out of the water and it rolls in mud. But even just chanting it once, and the intensity with which the Santa chant it once is enough. Maybe we don't chant it with that much single-pointedness, but we definitely burn away sin when we chant it with love and devotion. Yeah. And so this story is given as proof, Ajamila. Now, when we say sin, we'll think we're not so bad, and most of us aren't. And then Ajamila neglecting his wife and child and replacing them with a prostitute, and then having a child and not caring for that child. Now, this we all recognize as proper sin. Like, you know. Now, if he can cleanse himself, then we can definitely cleanse ourselves. And so Ajamila, hearing that consequences are waiting for him, realizing how much compassion the Lord had. Now, why should he be let off the hook like this? Like, is it really that karma won't work? Like, isn't karma supposed to work? Action is supposed to have consequence. We forget he did good action before. And so that good action that he did before he saw the prostitute, the punya of that was this saint accidentally comes to his house and names the child Narayana. And then shouldn't he suffer for all those sins? He does. In that moment of heart attack, we see time as very linear, but time's not so linear. Like when we have a dream, it's just 2 minutes and we can feel like we were in that dream for so long. Now here he is listening to the Yamadoots, telling him all the consequences he's going to have to face. Listening to the Vaikunth Doots telling him about Bhagwan's greatness and compassion and you have to free him. Feeling the guilt, knowing that he wasn't taking Bhagwan's name, knowing that as a Brahmana, that it's true that Bhagwan is that compassionate, and how to face Bhagwan when he was only calling his child and he actually had forgotten Bhagwan. And then hearing again the Yamadoots tell him an insult and criticize him, and we think it's just one small thing, but we don't realize how long that extended for him to be there in that moment. The shame he would have felt, the disgust he would have felt for himself, the regret he would have felt, the guilt he would have felt. Remember, all these emotions are hell. They are sufferings. And so even though we hear stories like this and it sounds like, we can just get away with doing whatever we want to do and then just say Bhagwan's name, it's not true. Actions will have consequences. But Bhagwan is that compassionate and his name is that powerful because Ajamela leaves home and goes straight to Haridwar and he sits and he meditates for years and years and years and years and years and years and years until he merges his mind with Bhagwan. And it's at that point that the Devatas come and say, no, 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 he doesn't deserve this. And it's at that point that Bhagwan says, the power of my name is the power of my name. And it's this same power of my name that we see even in Jada Bharata. It was chanting the name continuously before the deer came, and then after he was born again as human, that purifies him so much that Ma Kali comes herself to protect him. And that devotee's wish, I said it earlier also. Bhagwan fulfills wishes. We might not always be able to see it, but as King Bharata, he had so much love to save that deer. It was a desire in his heart that he save that deer. He fulfills that wish. He gives that deer the highest knowledge, frees him from animal birth, and then as a human, frees him from birth. So we might see only the faults and the mistakes. And if we look carefully, we see so much compassion, so much grace. We see how he's constantly helping and doing and supporting and uplifting. And then if we actually turn our mind and focus on him, remembering that he's constantly uplifting with his love, then we also feel empowered to lift ourselves. So we'll sing his name and focus our mind on his grace and surrendering our mistakes to his love.
Krishna Govinda Hare Murari, Krishna Govinda Hare Murari, He Nath Vasudeva,
He Nath Narayan Vasudeva,
Krishna Govinda Hare Murari,
Shri Krishna Govinda Hare Murari,
He Nath Vasudeva.
He Nath Narayan Vasudeva, Himata Swami Sakha Hamare, He Nath Narayan Vasudeva, Govinda Hare Murari, He Nath Narayan Vasudeva, Krishna Govinda Hare Murari, He Nath Narayan Vasudeva, Govinda Bolo Hari Gopal Bolo, 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 Radha Ramana Hari Gopal Bolo, Gopal Bolo, Gopal Bolo. Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah सर्वे सन्तु निरामया सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मामृतं गमय ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते
पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते
ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ